when I was going through the results and sort of drafting these recommendations, I had this line, foster a shared understanding. Um, and I felt it was a little sassy to say get real. But that's really what we are talking about. We want all of the stakeholder groups to get real. We want to have this holistic um, systems-based exploration that recognizes what's real for individuals, but also for employers and for community service providers. All of those individuals or groups need to be working together in tandem. And if we're not in the same reality, if we're not all talking about the same thing, then we can really get off course very quickly. And so one of the things that was really important about a systems-based approach is understanding the notion that career is more than just a job, right? Careers are this intersection of work, life, and learning, and there's impacts across all of those on the different groups throughout someone's life stage. There also is this really important need to understand the other's perspective, what might be going on for someone else. And that might include challenging disconnects or biases or assumptions that you might hold as a service provider, but an individual might hold, or even the support network around the individual might hold some assumptions about what work is decent work or good work, or what a good worker looks like, or how work should be being done, or needs to be done in the community. And so there's all these nuances and interconnected layers that I think are really important to unpack as we get started. So we're all talking about the same thing together, because when we do that, then we can actually address these systemic barriers, because over and over again, we heard from participants, not just individuals, but employers and people working in community settings as well, that they talked about the challenges of navigating this space. And not all of them used the word like a cycle of unemployment, but that's really what they were talking about. And so we need to account for these kinds of lived experiences, specifically within the rural and remote communities, because that is part of the ecosystem that these individuals are working in. And some individuals want to leave those communities and maybe come back. Others want to stay in community, and that's their right to have those decisions. But we need to be talking about what it's like in those spaces and what is it that we can build together. And so one of the things we're going to invite you to do is to come along this getting real journey. And I'd like to invite you to share in the Menti what you are specifically doing to challenge your biases and assumptions. I mean, you're joining us here today, and that's great. But are there any reflective questions or prompts that you use that are particularly helpful? Are there more broad approaches? Are there resources? What are you actually doing in your work to challenge those biases?
I'm seeing the first thing that comes up is ask questions, and that's such an important way of challenging our assumptions, isn't it? Is just not to assume.
Yeah, staying curious, I think, is a really important thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that really
Lots
relates back to adaptability as well.
Mm-hmm. Lots of listening.
Yeah. I love this reading from other points of view. I think it's really important to be looking out for perspectives that are different than your own. It could be podcasts or authors, web resources, or just people in the community.
Yeah, using the client as the expert is important as well.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of listening and asking questions and not judging, considering other worldviews.
Mm-hmm. I like this agreeing to disagree as well. I think that's an interesting perspective.
A good metacognition is asking myself why I have this assumption to better understand the roots. So first of all, being aware of our assumptions and then asking where they came from.
I love the idea of what else could be true, right? What else could be happening, like a thought experiment of that.
So access to credentials, but also access to training. If you are living in more remote communities, sometimes you have access to work that in the city you would need a specific certificate or education for. And so sometimes moving to remote communities opens up doors that wouldn't otherwise be open. So that relates, I think, to the next recommendation, which is make it personal. And so we need to all be deeply, deeply reflecting to examine how we might be contributing to the disconnects. And is there something that we can be doing that's within our own sphere of influence that can make a little bit of a difference? So empathy, understanding, awareness, part of that interpersonal connectiveness is super important. But also, I love the comment earlier around really digging deeply and questioning where did those assumptions and biases even come from? And really looking at making sure that our efforts are related to needs. One of the things that we have to be very careful of when working with individual clients is that we don't impose our causes or the things that are important to us on our individual clients. That might not be their most important need right now. And so I can't insist that my clients self-advocate, or I can't insist that my clients, get outraged about discrimination that they're facing, when that might be more my issue that I'm bringing to the table rather than what they want to work on right now. We can really look locally at small scale efforts. So even within a workplace, something as simple as diversity luncheons, but doing things that allow us to celebrate the individual differences and recognize the individual differences. Providing incentives that are relevant to the folks that we're working with. I remember supporting a local horticulture organization, and many of their workers were immigrant women, and they knew that if they gave them a bonus at the end of the year, that money would go back to the family. And what they wanted to do was celebrate the individual workers that they had with them. And so this organization put them all on a WestJet flight in the morning during the workday, during the regular scheduled workday, flew them up from Vancouver to West Edmonton Mall, probably from Abbotsford, took them shopping, gave them money to spend for shopping for the day, and then brought them back before the end of the workday, but so that their individual employees could benefit from that year-end bonus. So just a very different way of providing incentives and making their employees feel valued and respected. So we're going to give you an opportunity here to say, what's a manageable and meaningful shift that you could make yourself or within your organization in order to sort of level that playing field and break down the diversity disconnect in rural and remote communities. Asking what support is needed from you. So again, getting past our assumptions and our one-size-fits-all approaches and saying, what would be most helpful to you today?
I like the supporting diverse local businesses as well. I think that's a great.
Focus and reassess my programming to reflect the needs of my client in our area. Yeah, absolutely. Personalize it. Advocacy really is showing up here. Networking with employers and would-be employees.
I like the
Educating
educating
employers
too, because it's often we're focusing on supporting individuals and adjusting and developing their skills, but employers need skills too.
Yeah.
And
what a beautiful question.
Oh, sorry.
What a beautiful question. Do they need us to walk beside, in front, or behind them? Again, not making the assumption. So you can keep typing as we shift, I believe.
Yeah, so the third one that we wanted to talk about was staying diligent. And so being sure that you set aside sort of time, energy, and resources to monitor and evaluate your efforts and gather feedback from adapting and customizing your approach. And so this is really predicated on the notion that a one-size-fits-all solution for all quote unquote diverse groups isn't likely to be viable. The people you work with, they need customized supports that are going to meet their needs. And so ensuring that the customizations that you make are meeting needs, you're going to need to gather feedback from the group that you're working with. And staying patient, curious, and committed to that, because it can be challenging to always have to customize, to always have to adapt by not being able to just pick something off of the shelf and utilize it. But that's where meaningful impact can happen, is with these customized approaches. And oftentimes the customization is minor. It's not an unwieldy ask. It's not too big. It's something simple. It's making a connection in the community. It's bringing on another voice into an advisory committee to ensure that you're asking the questions that you need to ask. And acknowledging where you're lacking and staying committed. And part of that is going to have to be celebrating successes. So when you have a win, take the win. But also know that when things don't go the way that you necessarily planned, that's okay too. That's a learning opportunity for you. And the other invitation I had was about collecting feedback in meaningful ways. So sending a post-service, survey, for example, where people are rating a 1 through 5 how they found the services, may not necessarily always be the best way to collect feedback. The stories that we got in our research really were impactful to me and the other individuals that worked on this particular project. The voice of those people sticks with us. And so gathering stories is a really good way to collect feedback as well.
So moving on to the next recommendation, which is working together. So really looking around our community for ways to collaborate and work together. And remember, we had that interpersonal between the context and the individual, that connection piece really included a lot of the categories in our research. So we can identify and develop partnerships, we can coordinate efforts within our community. One of the things that we can do within our communities is name and address the damage of colonialism. We're learning so much about that now. We invite and recognize and value the voices of Indigenous partners. And that, to be honest, was not the case when my career began in this field more than 45 years ago. And so we've learned so much. We recognize now that we just don't know what we don't know, and we've got so much more to learn. And there are ways of doing it. There's good courses available. We're welcome into Indigenous communities to share in ceremonies and celebrations. And I just encourage all of you to commit to that learning. And it's similar with working with people with diverse abilities, or working with people with different cultural backgrounds. It's not until we get to know intimately as friends, as members of our extended family, as neighbors that we really interact with and care about, that we start to understand some of the very real challenges that people are facing. We, in working together, can also take a strengths-based approach. We don't have to be all things to all people. We can recognize that somebody else has real strengths and real successes in a certain area, and we can reach out or refer to them. We can identify not only where we can help, but also where we need help. And that's where our cultural humility comes in, and our openness in acknowledging what we don't know. Synergies, we know, bring in better results than people working in silos. And so we can take, some of those one-offs and share them, creating some spaces where what we've learned and what we've done can be broadly shared. And that's what we've done with the Diversity Disconnect site and recommendations. And as Megan mentioned in the chat, the podcast. So lots of information that can be shared as we work together to make this a better place. So over to Menti again. You probably all have some partnerships or opportunities that you'd like others to know about. So here's your opportunity to share, and do feel free to put contact information in there, or a website link or something, if it would help others get in touch with you and perhaps work with you on something that you're doing.
So the last recommendation that we had for you was to get loud. And so this was, again, a sassy way to end it as well, getting real as you start moving through the process and then getting loud. And so this is an invitation to share stories of success, but also challenges and frustrations, because that's what's going to happen along the way in this shared learning journey. And there is also sharing your message and your voice and advocating for the change that you want to have happen in your communities, but also looking to the community you serve and identifying the voices and stories that those individuals might need to have opportunities to share. And really recognizing the power of stories. You know, when I talk about staying diligent and research and all that stuff, we often think about numbers and figures and data and stats, but there really is a power to stories to be a catalyst of change. When we are able to share with each other our experiences, that can be a really good mobilizer, and helps us sort of channel the anger and frustration that we feel into something more hopeful for change. So gathering stories is really important, but when we talk about gathering stories, knowing that we're working with groups who maybe have been in very challenging circumstances themselves, we need to be mindful about what we have permission to share. And it's really important to ensure that we're not speaking for others, but rather inviting them to have opportunities to share themselves. And when they don't feel like they can, stepping in with permission to share. And so that really is a trauma-informed approach. And being ready to listen and hear and receive the messages and the feedback that have been shared with you is important as well, and creating those safe places to share. Because it's in these communications, these hard, difficult conversations, where learning can happen and growth can happen, but also that increased awareness and understanding.